The biggest issue with Bitcoin, or one of the biggest issues with Bitcoin, is you walk into a coffee shop, you can't pay for a cup of coffee because the transaction time takes 10 minutes. And it also costs you about $3 or $4 for a transaction fee.
Yes.
Nano solved this, and they have very fast, feeless transactions.
Okay, well, let's talk to Forex and see what he's got to show us on his elevator pitch. Now, you're like in an elevator on the West Coast, because crypto is a much more of a West Coast trade in LA, and some Hollywood agent, has you basically pigeonholed in an elevator, and you have to, in William Morris Agency, and you got to tell him, this is my best crypto trade. What is it? Talk to us.
Yeah, so this is going to be a slightly higher risk, but definitely a longer term trade. We are trying to capture a move from the bottom of this green accumulation zone all the way back up to the top. This is a cryptocurrency. Well, first of all, let me preface this with a bit of an elevator pitch. Last year, I believe the cannabis industry did $3.5 billion. No, not the cannabis industry. A company called FlowHub, which is a point of sale solution for brick and mortar cannabis stores, did $3.5 billion in transaction volume last year.
Really?
The regulation of,
was that in North America?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah. Okay.
So banks will not touch a lot of banks and payment processors like Square and PayPal will not touch the cannabis industry because it's not fully legal in the United States, right? So that presents a problem for payment terminals. A lot of the cannabis industry is done in cash. Well, enter Nano. Nano is very fast, a completely feeless cryptocurrency. The biggest issue with Bitcoin, or one of the biggest issues with Bitcoin, is you walk into a coffee shop, you can't pay for a cup of coffee because the transaction time takes 10 minutes, and it also costs you about $3 or $4 for a transaction fee.
Yes.
Nano solved this, and they have very fast, feeless transactions. FlowHub is implementing Nano, or clearly has plans to implement Nano as a payment option for their cannabis point of sale terminals, as they've appointed the CEO of FlowHub, Kyle Sherman, to the Nano Foundation. Right. So this coin has been
just to understand a little bit about Nano. Is Nano a protocol? Is it a token? Is it like a proof of stake kind of a token that is super fast? Why does it have no fees on it when you transact? Like, what makes it an ideal transactional token?
Yep, exactly. So it's imagine Bitcoin. Like, there's no smart contracts, but imagine Bitcoin, but it's fast and feeless, and that is Nano. A lot of the Nano crowd believes that Nano is what Bitcoin was meant to be.
It's not a smart contract. It's a blockchain, but without the overhead of Bitcoin, it doesn't really require massive mining costs. Is that what this is?
Right, because it uses a different technology. It's similar to a blockchain. It's called direct acyclic graph technology, where you basically have a lot of blockchains running in parallel. And it's using something called open representative voting, where basically each person delegates their voting power to a node. And those nodes are actually run by volunteers. It turns out that if you remove the monetary incentives to run a miner or run a node, people will still do it just to secure the protocol, just because they're invested in Nano and they want to see it succeed. So it's actually also very secure. It's actually, by some metrics, more secure than Bitcoin.
The people who own the token are effectively manning the nodes on a volunteer basis. That makes the token feeless. That is without any fees, and yet transactional. And so the idea here is that this is a token that could be the backbone for the marijuana industry, which simply cannot transact in fiat because of regulation. Is that the story?
Exactly. And from a technical perspective, it is very oversold right now. It's been in a downtrend that we just recently pumped and broken out of. But I still think it's a really solid buy down here. Now, interestingly, I think this will interest you guys to maybe do a little bit of further research on. They're actually taking Nano's technology and they're building an FX, a foreign exchange settlement layer as well. And I wish I could explain this a little bit better, but maybe I'll provide you guys with a link later. But basically, they're partnering with to do Forex, but have it settle in 2 to 3 seconds rather than have all that counterparty risk.
2 to 3 days. Right. Right.
Yep,
That's actually,
exactly.
we have a second. I'd love since you're obviously steeped in the technology. The single greatest advance, in my opinion, in crypto is the purely digital instant settlement nature of the product, which is just pulling the rest of finance kicking and screaming, with it. And I think that's sort of like, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about that. That in many ways is sort
Yeah.
of the future is what crypto is now, which is 24/7, completely instant settlement, fully, fungible transactional marketplace. What do you think? Is that? Do you think that
Absolutely. I really want to nail home the point that the crypto market right now is very driven by speculation, but much like the dot-com boom, out of the ashes of that bubble burst and out of the ashes of that speculation, we had projects and products that manifested with real demand. You look at Netflix, turns out there's demand for digital streaming. You look at Amazon, turns out there's real demand for e-commerce. Look at Facebook, there's real demand, not speculation, but real demand for social media, right? But there's what I see as a subsector of the crypto industry is exactly what you said, that instant payment settlement, cross-border transactions, remittances, right? Where that's the technological advancement. And while, yes, the space is super speculative and you've got all these meme coins and you've got the metaverse talk, that is one use case that I believe is going to carry forward out of the ashes of any bubble that gets burst.
I was actually thinking sort of much more native to our world, which is the markets world, that what makes crypto so interesting is the instant settlement layer. Everywhere else in the world we're T+2, including FX. In other words, in the big interbank market, we're settling 2 days forward. In stocks, we're still settling. Nick, I'm sure, can testify to that. We're still settling 2 days forward. There is that is the reason, by the way, why Robinhood nearly went bankrupt in overnight, because of settlement issues. It's not that they didn't have the money; they just didn't have the huge, massive amount of capital they needed to put up for the next 2 days in order to make sure all those trades settled. What crypto does right now, natively, is settle everything instantaneously. I mean, if you don't have rug pulls, that is, if you don't have essentially fake protocols, it's almost impossible to go bankrupt on a crypto transaction, because margining is instant. Like you just settlement is. It's really hard to go negative equity in crypto given the technology, and that's what I think is kind of interesting to the regular marketplace, which is still very vulnerable to all this like 19th century technology of like, oh, let me check my physical ledger before that trade clears. It's the clearing aspect of it, I think, is kind of that's the. Yes, you're right. There's this massive speculative bubble, but the foundational truth behind it is that clearing aspect that obviously is going to eventually make its way to the real world, to the traditional world.
Yeah, and that's essentially what Nano's trying to build for the FX market. It's very interesting. I'll send you some links later. You may be interested in reading about it.
That was very